The night before my flight to Australia, I woke to the heavy sound of a suitcase rolling down the stairs. My bedroom door had been locked from the outside. Through the crack, I saw my parents smiling like thieves while my sister wore the coat meant for me. She lifted my passport and whispered, "I'm the one who deserves the princess life. You're just a waitress carrying plates." I didn't scream. I didn't beg. Because they didn't know. That trip was a trap that would make them regret it for the rest of their lives. Thank you for being here, and I mean that more than it sounds. Before the story begins, tell me where you are right now. Your city, your country, leave it in the comments. You would be surprised how far this reaches. Some elements in this story are fictional shaped for narrative and reflection. Similarities to any name or location are purely coincidental, but what this story asks you to feel is completely intentional. There are things you learn before you are old enough to name them. I learned mine on a Tuesday morning when I was 7 years old, standing at the end of our driveway in Mesa Ridge, Arizona, wearing sneakers with a hole in the left sole. The rain came sideways that morning, the kind that finds every gap in your clothing before you have taken a single step. My backpack was soaked through before I reached the corner stop sign. Behind me, my father's truck sat running in the driveway. Exhaust curled up into the gray sky. Country music drifted out low through the cracked window. He was waiting for my older sister. Vanessa came out 4 minutes later. I counted every one of them. She had the yellow umbrella with white daisies, the one our mother had bought specifically for her birthday, not as a household item, not for sharing. She climbed into the passenger seat without glancing in my direction. My father pulled out of the driveway without glancing in my direction either. I walked to school alone in the rain. That evening, I stood in the bathroom doorway wringing out my socks when my mother walked past. Mom," I called after her. "My shoes are ruined. Can I get a ride tomorrow if it rains again?" She stopped halfway down the hall and turned just enough to answer. "Your sister has dance rehearsal at 7:30. Your father needs the truck free." "I can leave early. I'll wait in the car." "I don't mind." "Elena." Her voice landed the way a door closes, not slammed, just shut. Final. "Your sister has real commitments in the morning. You have school. Don't make everything about yourself." I stared at the back of her head as she walked away. Just school. The place I walked 40 minutes to every morning in whatever weather Arizona decided to throw at me was just school. Less important than Vanessa's dance rehearsal. Less important than Vanessa's sleep. Less important than anything that had Vanessa's name attached to it. I went and hung up my wet socks. I didn't say another word. My name is Elena Brooks. I am 27 years old, and I am telling you this from the very beginning because the ending only makes sense when you understand what was done to me and for how long, and by the people who were supposed to protect me most. The Brooks house on Callaway Street ran on a system nobody ever announced out loud. It simply existed, built into the walls of that place the way rot is built into old wood, invisible, until you knew where to press. I woke at 5 every morning. My older sister Vanessa woke when she felt like it. I cooked breakfast. Vanessa ate it. I washed, dried, and folded the laundry for the entire household. Vanessa's clean clothes appeared on her bed. Mine I handled myself after everything else was done. One Saturday morning when I was 8, my father called me into the kitchen before I had eaten a single bite. "Elena, the lawn needs doing." I looked out the window at the long grass already shimmering in the early heat. "Can I eat first? I haven't had breakfast yet." "It needs doing before it gets too hot. Move." My mother's voice drifted in from the living room light and unbothered. "Tell her to do the dishes after Victor. I don't want to come home to a mess." I looked at the sink. Full. I looked at the clock. 7 in the morning. "Where's Vanessa?" I asked. My father looked at me the way adults look at children who have said something embarrassing in public. "Your sister is sleeping. She had a late night." "I had a late night too. I was doing homework until—" "Elena." His voice dropped to the register that meant the conversation was finished. Do you want to stand here arguing with me, or do you want to go do what you were asked? My stomach turned over. I went and mowed the lawn. When I came back inside an hour later, sweaty and grass-stained before 8:30 in the morning, Vanessa was at the kitchen table, eating the breakfast I had made before I went outside. Scrolling through something on the tablet, one leg crossed over the other, completely at ease. She didn't look up when I walked in. You left a streak near the fence, she said. I stopped. What? She nodded toward the window, still not looking at me. The lawn. There's a line where you turn too fast. Dad's going to see it. I stood there for a moment, grass on my arms and sweat on my neck, looking at my older sister sitting in the chair I had not been allowed to sit in this morning because there was work to be done. She picked up her orange juice and took a slow sip. Thanks, I said, and my voice came out flatter than I intended. She finally looked up. She had our mother's eyes, dark, sharp, and very good at finding the exact pressure point. Don't be like that, she said pleasantly. I'm just trying to help you. She smiled and went back to the tablet. I did the dishes. I told myself it didn't matter. I got very good at telling myself that. There was one place where that weight lifted. One house where I didn't have to be invisible. Beatrice Sloane lived directly across the street in the yellow house with the green shutters. She was a retired nurse, 60-something, silver-haired, steady-handed, and she had lived on Callaway Street longer than my parents had been married. She watched the neighborhood the way good nurses watch a ward, quietly, constantly, and with the particular attention of someone who has learned that the patients who ask for nothing are usually the ones who need the most. She never announced that she was keeping an eye on me. She just did it. A plate of food left on her porch steps on evenings she knew my mother hadn't left anything behind. A wave from across the street on cold mornings when I passed with wet shoes. A look in her eyes that I could not name when I was small, but now I recognize, without any difficulty at all. It was sorrow. I knocked on her door once, soaked from an afternoon storm, nowhere else to go. She opened it, looked me over from head to foot, and said simply, "Get in here before you flood my porch." She gave me a towel and a mug of hot cocoa and sat across from me at her kitchen table without asking me to explain a single thing. We just sat. It was the most peaceful I had felt in months. Her hallway had a shelf of photographs. One face caught me, a woman I had seen once in a photo buried on my mother's bureau behind other things. My grandmother, Margaret Brooks. You knew my grandma? I asked. Beatrice looked at the photograph for a moment before she answered. Since before your mother was born? Mom never talks about her. Something shifted in Beatrice's expression. Careful, private, deciding. Your grandmother was one of the finest women I ever knew, she said. She would have moved mountains for you, Elena. You hold on to that. I didn't understand what she meant. I was too young and too tired to chase it. I filed it away in the part of my mind where I kept the things that didn't open up for me yet. The year I turned 9, the quiet years, broke open. Not because anything improved, because my older sister had grown bored with being simply the favorite and had decided she wanted something sharper. That October morning, I was in the upstairs hallway carrying a full laundry basket, everyone's clothes freshly folded as always. Vanessa stood in front of the bathroom mirror at the end of the hall, taking up the entire corridor, turning her face side to side, with the satisfaction of someone who had never once been told to hurry. Vanessa, I said, shifting the basket on my hip. I need to get past. She didn't move. Didn't even look at me in the mirror. I'm busy. It'll take 2 seconds. I just need to put the laundry away. Then wait 2 seconds. I waited. 1 minute. My arms burned from the weight of the basket. Vanessa, please. You know what? She turned and looked at me with the specific, practiced exhaustion of someone who found my presence genuinely offensive. You are so impatient. Every single morning you have to make something into a problem. I stepped to the side to squeeze past her in the narrow hallway. My shoulder barely grazed hers. What happened next took less than 2 seconds and set the shape of the next 18 years. She seized the railing with both hands and threw herself sideways, sharp, deliberate crashing hard against the top stair, with a sound that shook the walls. And before the noise had even finished, she turned her face up toward the landing and screamed. She pushed me. Mom Elena pushed me down the stairs. My stomach dropped straight through the floor. I didn't. My voice shook, but I held my ground. Vanessa? I barely touched you. She shoved me. Her voice cracked perfectly, tears already running down both cheeks. I could have broken my neck. She shoved me into the railing on purpose. I heard my mother's feet hit the floor in the bedroom, then my father's heavier steps in the hall. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the laundry basket. I looked at my older sister over the railing. She looked back at me. The tears were running. The voice had broken in exactly the right place, but her eyes behind all of it were completely, utterly calm. She had done this before. Maybe not this exact thing, but something in the precision of it, the timing, the scream, the tears already ready, told me this was not the first time she had rehearsed a version of it in her head. And I was 9 years old, and I already knew that no one in that house was going to believe me. My father reached the hallway first. His face was already decided before he had taken 3 steps, jaw set, eyes flat, wearing the expression he kept specifically for moments involving me. "What did you do?" he said. Not what happened. Not, "Are you hurt?" What did you do? I didn't push her. I kept my voice as steady as I could manage. I was carrying the laundry and I needed to get past. My shoulder touched hers for 1 second, that's all. She shoved me into the railing. Vanessa's voice drifted up from the top of the stairs, soft and wounded, perfectly calibrated. I almost went all the way down, Dad. My back really hurts. My father looked at me the way he looked at things he had already made up his mind about. Why does it always have to be you? Because she is lying. The words came out harder than I planned. She fell on purpose. I watched her grab the railing before she even started going down. His hand came across before I finished the sentence. The back of his palm caught the side of my face and knocked me sideways into the wall. My shoulder hit the plaster first, then my cheek scraped it and I slid 2 inches before my legs caught me. The hallway spun. My ear rang like something had been struck inside it and couldn't stop vibrating. Victor." My mother's voice from the staircase. Not alarmed. Not horrified. Flat, the way you speak when something mildly inconvenient has happened that someone else will clean up. She stands there and lies to my face. My father's voice shook not with regret, with the particular tremor of a man who needed to believe he was justified. Every single time, lies and talks back, and acts like she has done nothing wrong. I have done nothing wrong. My voice came out wet, and I hated myself for it. I pressed my lips together until they went white, and I stared at the floor and I breathed. I did not cry in front of him. I had learned by then what crying in front of him cost. It went longer. It gave him language to use against me afterward. She was hysterical. She was dramatic. She always makes everything worse. From the staircase, Vanessa watched. She had stopped producing tears the exact moment my father's full attention shifted to me. Now she stood with one hand on the railing cheek, resting lightly against her own arm, watching with the patient satisfaction of someone observing something they had built perform exactly as intended. My mother came down the stairs and walked past me without pausing, without looking to reach my older sister on the landing above. "Does anything hurt, sweetheart?" She ran both hands gently over Vanessa's arms and shoulders, tilting her chin upward to check her face the way a jeweler examines something precious for damage. "My lower back," Vanessa said softly. "And my ankle." "She really pushed hard, Mom." "I know, baby." My mother's voice dropped to the low, soothing register she kept exclusively for Vanessa. "Come on downstairs, let's get some ice on that. She guided my older sister past me with one arm around her shoulders, murmuring something gentle, already solving the problem of Vanessa's comfort. Neither of them looked at me as they passed. I stood against the wall in the hallway, alone. My face throbbed where my father's hand had landed. My shoulder ached from the plaster. From the kitchen, I could hear my mother's voice, soft and continuous, asking whether Vanessa wanted tea or just water, whether she needed to sit or to lie down on the couch. My father had already gone back to the bedroom. The hallway was empty. Nobody checked whether I was bleeding. Nobody asked if I was all right. I was 9 years old and I had just been hit hard enough to put me into a wall, and the two people responsible for my safety were in the next room deciding what kind of ice pack my older sister preferred. The front door opened. Beatrice Sloane stepped into the doorway in her reading glasses and house slippers, which meant she had come straight from her chair the moment she heard the noise. Her eyes moved across my face in 1 second flat. Her jaw tightened by 1 degree. That was the only outward sign of what she was feeling, but I had spent enough time in her kitchen to know that 1 degree from Beatrice Sloane was the equivalent of anyone else slamming a fist on a table. Victor. Her voice carried down the hall level cold, the tone of a woman who had spent 2 decades telling people the truth about their condition, whether they wanted to hear it or not. Come out here right now. My father appeared in the bedroom doorway. This is a family matter, Beatrice. I am aware of what it is. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. I am taking Elena across the street to clean up her face. If you have a problem with that, you can take it up with Owen Carter. Sheriff Owen Carter ran the local department and had gone to school with my father. My father knew exactly what a call from Beatrice Sloane to Owen Carter would look like. My father said nothing. Beatrice walked me out. Her kitchen smelled like lavender and strong coffee. She sat me at the table and opened the first aid kit above the sink. The organized, professional kind, divided into labeled sections, the kind kept by someone who understood that emergencies did not wait for you to find the right drawer. She cleaned the mark on my cheek with something that stung sharp and immediate. "You can react," she said. "Nobody is watching." "I'm fine. Elena." She stopped what she was doing and looked at me directly. "You are in my kitchen. You do not have to perform fine in here." My throat closed up all at once. My eyes burned hot and sudden, and one tear broke loose before I could catch it. Fast Furious swiped away before it reached my jaw. "She planned it," I said. My voice came out raw. "She grabbed the railing before she even started falling. I saw her do it." Beatrice smoothed a bandage below my cheekbone and sat down across from me. "I believe you," she said. "Then why does nobody in that house believe me?" She folded her hands on the table. "Because believing you would require your parents to see something about themselves that they have decided not to see. And people will do almost anything to avoid that." I stared at the table. Something about those words settled into my chest like a stone dropping into still water. "Should I call Owen?" Beatrice asked. "Say the word. I will make that call tonight, and I will stand behind every word of it." I thought about it. I thought about going home after a call like that. I thought about my father's face the next morning. I thought about the 9 years still ahead of me under that roof. "No," I said. "Don't call anyone." Beatrice held my gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded once, and she did not argue, and she did not tell me I was making a mistake. She accepted my answer the way you accept a decision that belongs to someone else entirely. She refilled my water glass and sat back with me until the light outside her window went orange and low. At one point, she looked at the photograph shelf in the hallway, herself and my grandmother, young and laughing somewhere green. "She made sure you weren't left with nothing," Beatrice said quietly. "Your grandmother. She was very deliberate about that." I looked up. "What does that mean?" Beatrice met my eyes and held them for a beat. "It means exactly what I said. You'll understand it when the time comes." I was 9 years old and my face hurt, and I was too exhausted to pull at something that wouldn't open, so I let it go. I walked home that evening with clean bandages and a decision sitting cold and firm in my chest. I went back through that front door with my chin level and my face showing nothing. I had decided at Beatrice's table that I would never let them see me break again. Not once. Not for any of them. What I did not know yet was that the stillness I built that evening, the silence, the locked jaw, the face that gave nothing away, was not just armor. It was a weapon. And one day I was going to use it. Years have a way of moving fast when you are too busy surviving to watch them go. I did not leave the Brooks house on Calloway Street until I was 22 years old. That is 13 years after the morning my father drove past me in the rain. 13 years of 5 a.m. alarms of other people's laundry of dinners I cooked, and did not always get to eat while they were still warm. 13 years of telling myself it did not matter. I got very good at math during those years. Not the kind they teach in school, the other kind. The kind where you calculate exactly how much longer you have to hold on before you can breathe. I started working at 16. My mother framed it as a lesson in responsibility. Every young person should know the value of earning their own money. She told me one evening, her scissors moving through a customer's hair at the salon. She had called me in after school to sweep up. It builds character. Okay, I said, pushing the broom. So I can keep what I earn. She looked at me in the mirror. You'll contribute to the household, of course. That's what family does. How much? We'll figure it out as we go. We figured it out to be most of it. Every 2 weeks, I handed over 2/3 of my paycheck in cash, and my mother folded it into her purse without counting it in front of me. When I asked what it went toward, she said, utilities, groceries, the things a family needs. But the lights got shut off twice that year anyway, and some weeks' dinner was whatever I put together from what was left in the pantry. Meanwhile, Vanessa, 29 now and still living at home, had recently decided she wanted to become a beauty influencer. My parents bought her a ring light, a new phone, and a backdrop for her bedroom. I bought my own work shoes. The first time I heard Clayton Briggs's name, I was 18. I was lying in bed past midnight when my father's voice came through the wall, low and tight, in the way it only got when he was scared. I just need 2 more weeks, Clayton, he said. I've got a line on something. Just give me 2 more weeks. I lay there in the dark with my eyes open and my chest going cold. I had heard that tone before, not often, but enough to know it meant something had already gone wrong and my father was trying to keep it from getting worse. I asked my mother about it the next morning. Who is Clayton Briggs? I said. She was at the coffee maker with her back to me. Her shoulders went tight for exactly 1 second before she relaxed them again. Nobody. A business contact of your father's. It didn't sound like a business call. It sounded like a debt call. She turned around and her face was the closed, finished version, the one that meant the conversation was already over. Elena, mind what concerns you. This house concerns me. I pay into it every month, and we appreciate that. Her voice was smooth and final, the way concrete is smooth. Now go, or you'll be late. I went. But I started paying attention after that. I started noticing the envelopes that came and went on the kitchen counter, the calls my father took outside, the way he and my mother stopped talking when I walked into a room. I was 19 when I found the first thing Marlene did not want me to find. I was cleaning my grandmother's old room. My parents had converted it to storage when I moved the bureau away from the wall to sweep behind it. A small envelope fell from where it had been wedged between the bureau and the baseboard. It was sealed. My name was written on the front in handwriting I did not recognize. Below my name, in smaller letters, from Margaret, my grandmother, who had been dead for 3 years. My hands went cold. I turned the envelope over. What are you doing in here? My mother was in the doorway. I had not heard her come up the stairs. Her eyes went from my face to the envelope in my hands, and something moved fast across her expression. Not guilt, exactly. More like calculation. I found this behind the bureau, I said. It has my name on it. Give me that. She crossed the room and took it from my hand before I could pull back. Her fingers were quick and certain, like she had been waiting for this moment and had already decided what she would do. That's mine, I said. It says my name. It's old paperwork, nothing important. She tucked it into the pocket of her cardigan. Finish sweeping and come down for dinner. She left. I stood in the middle of that room with my hand still held out in the shape of something that had just been taken from me, and my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my back teeth. I did not go down for dinner that night. I sat on the edge of the stripped bed in my grandmother's emptied room, and I stared at the wall, and I felt something harden in my chest that had been soft for a long time. Whatever that envelope contained, my mother had just decided it belonged to her. I left the house at 22. One bag, one box a room I had already paid the deposit on 3 weeks earlier without telling anyone. I had saved the money in an account my mother did not know existed. $20 here, $40 there over 2 years. The morning I left, nobody was awake. I carried my bag to the car I had bought with money they did not know I had saved, and I drove away from Calloway Street in the gray before sunrise, without looking back. I told myself I was done. I told myself that door was closed. I did not know yet that some doors only stay shut until someone on the other side decides they need something from you again. Harlow's Steakhouse smelled like charcoal smoke and expensive bourbon on Friday nights, and I had learned to tell the difference between the two kinds of people. That combination attracted the ones who had earned what they were spending, and the ones who needed everyone in the room to know they could afford to spend it. After 5 years working the floor, I could read a table in under 30 seconds. I was 24 when I started at Harlow's 2 years after I left Calloway Street. I had the night shift 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. 5 nights a week. The tips were good if you knew how to work the room, and I knew how to work the room. I had been managing difficult people since I was 5 years old. A restaurant full of them was practically familiar. Nora Wells was the bartender on my shift. She was sharp-tongued, quick with a pour, and the first person since Beatrice Sloane who looked at me like I was actually standing in the room. We had been friends since my 3rd week when she covered my tables without being asked while I dealt with a customer who thought grabbing a server's wrist was an acceptable way to get attention. "You didn't report that," she said afterward, leaning against the bar. "Hank would have made it a whole thing," I said. Hank Miller was our floor manager, mid-40s, not a bad person, but the kind of man who believed customer complaints were staff problems until proven otherwise. I had learned to pick my battles with him. "One day," Nora said, pointing a swizzle stick at me, "someone is going to make it a whole thing on your behalf, whether you want them to or not." I did not know then how right she was. The first time I noticed Damien Vale, he was sitting alone at table 12 on a Friday night in early spring. He was wearing a dark flannel shirt worn at the elbows and the kind of jeans that come from actual work, rather than a store trying to sell the appearance of it. He drove a Ram 1500 pickup. I saw it in the lot when I arrived, dark blue, several years old, one long scratch across the rear panel. He ordered a ribeye medium rare with water and a side of the house bread. No cocktail, no appetizer, no performance. I brought his order and he thanked me by name, not from the name tag which I had forgotten to put on that night, but because he had apparently heard Nora call across the floor to me 10 minutes earlier. I noticed that. I noticed it and filed it. He came back the following Friday. Same table, same order, same quiet manner. And the Friday after that. He asks for your section specifically. Nora told me at the bar one night refilling my drink tray. He called ahead and asked which tables you cover. I looked over at table 12. Damien was reading something on his phone, entirely unbothered, completely, unaware or unconcerned that I had just been told this. "That's either very sweet or very alarming," I said. "Could be both," Nora said cheerfully and slid 2 glasses across the bar. I watched him more carefully after that. He never tried to extend conversations, never lingered when I needed to move, never made me feel like I owed him attention for the tip he left, which was always exactly 20% no more, and no less generous, but not the kind of generous that comes with expectations attached. He remembered things. That was the part I could not easily categorize. 3 weeks in, he stopped ordering the house bread, and when I asked if something was wrong with it, he said simply, "I noticed you mentioned once that the rosemary in it bothers you. Allergic." I stared at him. "I said that to Nora, across the room, 4 Fridays ago." He shrugged, unbothered. "You looked uncomfortable after you handled the basket. I figured it out." My chest did something complicated that I chose not to examine too closely. It was a Friday in late April when everything shifted. I was running the floor at 11 p.m., 40 minutes from last call, when Hank Miller appeared at my elbow with the expression he wore when something had gone wrong and he needed someone to absorb it. "Table 9 has a complaint," he said, voice low. "Customer says $80 disappeared from his tab. He's saying it was you." My stomach dropped. "That's not possible. I haven't handled Table 9's tab since. He's got his receipt and there's a discrepancy. Elena, I need you to come to the office." My face went hot, and my hands went cold at the same time. 6 years I had worked service jobs. 6 years without a single complaint about a missing cent. Nora caught my eye from the bar. Her expression said she did not believe it for 1 second. In Hank's office, the customer was a man I half recognized, late 20s, thick-necked, the kind of energy that filled a room sideways. He had a receipt and a story, and the practiced confidence of someone who had done this before. "I don't know what to tell you," he said, not looking at me directly. "The numbers don't add up, and she was the one at my table." "I want to see the camera footage," I said. Hank looked uncomfortable. "Elena, I want to see it. Right now. If I took $80, it will be on camera. And if I didn't, that will also be on camera." The door to the office opened without a knock. Damian Vale stepped in, and the temperature in the room changed the way it does when someone enters who is not particularly interested in the existing dynamic. "I was at table 12 all night," he said. He looked at the man across from me with an expression that was completely calm and somehow worse for it. "I have a clear sightline to table 9 from where I sit. I did not see what you are describing." The man's jaw shifted. "I don't know who you are." "That's fine." Damien looked at Hank. "Pull the footage. I'll wait." The footage showed a young man at table 9, late 20s, ball cap pulled low, lean across and lift the tab folder while my back was turned. The angle was not perfect, but it was enough. Hank looked at the screen for a long moment and then looked at the man sitting across from me who was no longer meeting anyone's eyes. Hank cleared his throat. "I think we're done here." The man left. Hank turned to me, and to his credit, his discomfort was genuine. "I should have pulled the footage first. I'm sorry, Elena." "Yes," I said. "You should have." I walked out into the hallway and stood there for a moment with my back against the wall, and my heart still hammering from the aftershock of nearly losing the one stable thing in my life over a lie. Damien came out behind me. "Thank you," I said. "You would have gotten there yourself," he said. "Probably, but it would have taken longer and been uglier." I looked at him directly for what felt like the first time. "Why did you come in there?" He met my eyes. "Because I saw his face when Hank called you over and I recognized what it looked like." "What did it look like?" "Like someone who had already decided how it was going to go." He paused. "Do you know that man?" My mouth went dry. "Because I did, in the way you know a name before you know the face attached to it." Ball cap, thick-necked, late 20s. Clayton Briggs had a son. I had heard my father say the name once through the wall at midnight. "Brett." "Not personally," I said carefully. "But I think I know whose son he is." Damien looked at me for a moment. Something shifted behind his eyes, not surprise. more like a piece moving into a place it had been heading toward for a while. "When you're ready to talk about that," he said, "I'll be at table 12 on Friday." He left. I stood in the hallway with the name Brett Briggs sitting in my chest like a coal that had not finished burning, and the slow, cold understanding that whatever my father had started with Clayton Briggs had just reached out and touched my life directly. He came back the following Friday. Same table, same order, same flannel shirt, different color. I noticed. I told myself I was only noticing because it was my job to notice regulars. Nora noticed me noticing. "He called ahead again," she said, sliding a drink tray across the bar without being asked. "Asked for your section. And this time he left his number with the host. Said if you were not in that night, he would come back the following Friday, and the one after that." I picked up the tray. "That's either very considerate or the beginning of a problem." "Elena." Nora leaned on the bar and looked at me with the particular expression she wore when she thought I was being deliberately obtuse. "The man drives 40 minutes from wherever he lives to sit alone at your tables every single Friday night and tips exactly 20% without fail. That is not a problem. That is a man with a plan. I don't need anyone's plan right now. What you need," she said, "and what is actually good for you are two completely different things, and you know it." I walked away before she could finish being right. Over the following 3 weeks, Damien Vale became something I did not have a clean category for. He was not a problem customer. He made no demands, caused no scenes, asked for nothing beyond his ribeye and his water. He was not a friend because we barely spoke beyond the transaction of the meal. But he was something. Something that took up more space in my awareness than I could justify professionally. He remembered things. That was what I could not file away neatly. One Friday I came in running late after my online management course had gone 20 minutes over, still pulling my hair back at the service entrance. When I got to his table, he had already been there 40 minutes, his food half finished, and he looked up and said, "How did the module on revenue forecasting go?" I stopped. "I mentioned that course once, 6 weeks ago." "You looked frustrated about it." I wondered if it got easier. My chest did something I refused to name. "It's getting there," I said, and moved on before my face could do anything that required explaining. The night everything broke open was a Thursday in late May, not a Friday. I had picked up an extra shift to cover for a colleague who had called in sick, which meant I finished at 1:30 in the morning instead of my usual 2. The parking lot behind Harlow's was half empty at that hour. 3 cars, including mine, 2 dumpsters, a broken light over the rear door that Hank had been meaning to fix for 6 weeks. I was 20 feet from my car when I heard footsteps behind me, then 2 more sets joining the first. "Hey." The voice was loud in the quiet lot. "Hey, waitress. You forget something inside." I did not turn around. I kept walking, and I pulled my keys out and I pressed the unlock button so my car lights flashed, a habit, something a self-defense instructor had said once about making yourself visible. "She's ignoring us." A second voice, amused. "That's rude. Real rude." The first one again, closer now. "We just want to talk." I was 5 steps from my car door when a hand closed around my wrist from behind and yanked me backward hard enough that my keys flew out of my hand and clattered somewhere in the dark. My heart slammed into my ribs so hard it hurt. My throat locked completely. "Let go." My voice came out steady in a way that had nothing to do with how I felt. "Let go of my arm right now. Relax." The man holding my wrist was grinning. I could hear it in his voice even before I turned and saw his face. Mid-30s, heavy-built, smelling of beer and the specific confidence of someone who had done this before and never faced a consequence for it. "We're just being friendly." "She doesn't look friendly," said the third one, stepping around to block the gap between the cars. My whole body was shaking. Not visibly, I had 20 years of practice keeping it inside, but every nerve I had was screaming at a frequency I could feel in my back teeth. I looked at the gap between the second man and the dumpster, calculating whether I could make it, knowing I probably couldn't. Knowing my phone was in my jacket pocket, and my jacket was pinned between my arm and this man's grip. A pair of headlights swept into the far end of the lot. The Ram 1500 pulled in slowly, no hurry, and stopped. The engine cut. The door opened. Damien Vale stepped out into the lot and walked toward us with his hands in his jacket pockets, and the unhurried, deliberate pace of a man who had already decided how this was going to go before he left the car. He stopped 8 feet away. He looked at the man holding my wrist. He did not raise his voice. He did not reach for anything. He just looked steady and absolute and said, "Take your hand off her. Right now." Something in his voice was not loud, but it was heavy, the kind of heavy that sits in a room and changes the air pressure. The grinning man's expression shifted. The fingers around my wrist loosened by degrees. "Who are you?" the third man said, but his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. "Nobody interesting." Damien took one step forward, just one. "But I've been sitting in that lot for 20 minutes, and I have a very clear view of this entire area and a phone with a fully charged battery. So you have about 10 seconds to decide whether this conversation is worth what comes after it." The man holding my wrist dropped it. They left. Not running too much pride for that, but walking fast, not looking back, the bravado evaporating with every step they put between themselves and Damien. I stood in the empty lot and my knees nearly buckled. My hands were shaking so hard I could see it in the ambient light from the street. The adrenaline crashing through me had nowhere to go, and my eyes burned hot and sudden, and I blinked hard 3 times because I absolutely refused to cry in a parking lot. "Your keys are over there." Damien pointed to a spot near the rear tire of my car. He did not touch me, did not move toward me, just pointed, giving me back the space the other 3 had taken. I walked to my car on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else, crouched down and picked up my keys and stood back up, gripping them so hard the metal bit into my palm. "You were already in the lot," I said. My voice came out rougher than I intended. "You said 20 minutes. I finished my coffee and I was heading out. I saw you leave through the rear and I saw them follow." He paused. "I should have moved sooner. I'm sorry." I looked at him. His face was even, unhurried, completely free of the particular smugness that men sometimes wear after doing something they expect to be thanked for. There was none of that. Just a straightforward acknowledgement that he had not acted fast enough and was owning it. My chest ached in a way that had nothing to do with the fear that was still draining out of me. "I'll call you a car," he said, already pulling out his phone. "I can drive." "Your hands are shaking." He said it without judgment, just observation. 15 minutes. Let it pass first." He called the car. He stood at a distance while we waited, not crowding me, not filling the silence with reassurances I didn't ask for. When the car came, he held the door and then stepped back. "Friday," I said before I could stop myself. He looked at me. "Table 12," I said. "I'll be there." Something shifted in his expression, not a smile exactly, but the thing that happens just before one. "I'll be there too," he said. I got in the car. As we pulled out of the lot, I looked back through the rear window. He was standing in the broken light by the dumpsters watching the car go, and he did not move until we turned the corner and I could not see him anymore. My hands stopped shaking somewhere on the highway home, but the ache in my chest, the one I still hadn't named, that one stayed. Nora Wells had the particular gift of knowing exactly when to say the thing you were not ready to hear, and absolutely no interest in waiting until you were ready. She cornered me at the service station the following Friday, before my shift started, arms crossed, with the expression of someone who had been holding something in for longer than was comfortable. "He asked me about you," she said. I looked up from my order pad. "Who did—" "Don't do that." She pointed at me. "You know exactly who. Damien. He asked me about you 3 weeks ago, and I answered him, and I have been trying to figure out when to tell you ever since. My pen stopped moving. Something cold moved through my chest. What did you tell him? The truth. That you work doubles when you're short on rent, that you study for your management course in the break room between tables, that you came in once running 102-degree fever because your mother had called and told you the household needed your paycheck that week. Nora's voice was steady, but her eyes were watching me carefully. He asked like someone who actually wanted to know, not gossip, not entertainment. He asked like someone taking notes on something that mattered. The cold in my chest turned into something sharper. My jaw tightened until it ached. You had no right to tell him any of that, I said. My voice came out low and controlled, but the edge in it was real. That is my life, Nora, not yours to hand out. I know. She did not flinch. And I'm sorry. But Elena, the man, already knew half of it just from watching. I didn't tell him anything he hadn't already figured out. I just confirmed it. That is not better. I slapped my order pad down on the counter. That is actually worse. You know what my family is like. You know why I do not let people... I know. Her voice dropped softer now, the sharpness gone. I know exactly why. That's the only reason I'm telling you instead of pretending it didn't happen. Because I think this one might be different, and I would rather you be angry at me for being honest than blindsided later for staying quiet. I stared at her. My throat felt tight. My eyes were burning in the way they did when I was furious and sad at the same time, and could not cleanly separate the two. Different, I repeated. Every person who has ever done damage to my life looked different from the outside. I know, Nora said again quietly. But most of them didn't go out of their way to make sure you got home safe on a Thursday night in a parking lot. I had not told her about the parking lot. I had told no one. My head snapped up. Beatrice called me, Nora said simply. She has her sources. I picked up my order pad. I breathed in through my nose. I was not ready to feel whatever was building behind my sternum, so I pushed it flat and put it somewhere I could examine later. We are not done talking about this, I said. I know, Nora said, and this time she was almost smiling. I had made it through exactly 4 tables when Hank Miller appeared at my elbow with a look that meant paperwork and a problem. Come to the office when you get a moment, he said. It's about last week. The footage was on his monitor when I walked in, paused on a frame of a young man in a ball cap leaning across a table. Hank had zoomed in on the face and enhanced it as much as the camera quality allowed. I had it clean it up, he said. I wanted to be sure before I said anything. He turned the monitor toward me. Do you know this person? My stomach turned over hard. The face on screen was younger than I had imagined, mid-20s, broad jaw, the kind of look that had been handsome once before something mean settled into it. Ball cap pulled low, but not low enough, and around his neck, just visible at the collar, a lanyard with a logo I recognized from a building on Route 7. Briggs Auto and Truck. Clayton Briggs's garage. His name is Brett Briggs, I said. My voice came out flat and very calm, the way it always did when my body was doing one thing and my face was doing another. He is Clayton Briggs's son. Clayton Briggs is the man my father owes money to. Hank went very still. Your father owes money to the father of the man who tried to get you fired. Yes. Elena. Hank rubbed his jaw. He looked genuinely uncomfortable, and to his credit, it was the discomfort of a man realizing he had almost participated in something ugly without knowing it. I owe you a better apology than I gave you last week. I should have pulled the footage before I called you into this office. Yes, I said again. You should have. He nodded. He deserved the bluntness, and he knew it. What do you want to do with this, I want a copy of that footage sent to my email, tonight. Done. I walked out of Hank's office and down the hall and pushed through the rear door into the cool night air and stood there with my hands pressed flat against the brick wall and my lungs working harder than they should have been. Brett Briggs, Clayton's son. Sent to Harlow's specifically to destroy my job, my income, the one stable thing I had built outside of that house on Calloway Street. This had not been random. This had been a message from Clayton Briggs to my father. Your daughter is not untouchable. A voice came from the corner of the lot. You look like someone just confirmed something they were hoping wasn't true. Damien was leaning against the wall near the service door jacket collar up against the night air takeout cup in one hand, not waiting for me, or if he was doing it in a way that could plausibly be described as coincidence. I looked at him for a long moment. My chest was so full of rage and fear and something else I still had not named that I did not trust what would come out if I opened my mouth wrong. Brett Briggs, I finally said. The man from last week. His father is the man my father owes $600,000 to, and that man just sent his son to my workplace to try to take away my job. Damien set the takeout cup down on the ledge beside him. He was not performing shock. He was not performing sympathy. His expression was simply direct, focused, and real, and aimed entirely at me. How long has your father owed that money? He asked. Years. I don't know exactly. Long enough that it has a shape now. Does your father know Brett came here? I don't know. Maybe. Maybe Clayton acts without telling him, and that is part of how the control works. My voice cracked on the last two words, and I hated it. I pressed my lips together. I have been outside their mess for 5 years. I left that house. I built this job and this life from nothing, and they are reaching into it anyway. Damien was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. Then, can I ask you something? Go ahead. What do you want to happen? His voice was even, not leading, not suggesting, genuinely asking. Not what you want to avoid. What do you actually want the outcome to be? Nobody had ever asked me that question. Not once. My whole life had been structured around avoiding the next bad thing, the next punishment, the next debt, the next way the family would reach out and take something from me. The idea that I could want an outcome, a specific one, and work toward it deliberately. My eyes burned. I blinked hard. I want them to face what they have done, I said. My voice came out fierce and a little unsteady. Not just my father, all of them. I want it to cost them what it has cost me. Damien looked at me for a moment. Something in his expression settled into something else, something that looked very much like a decision being made. Then we should talk, he said. Not here. Somewhere quieter. When you're ready. I looked at him, this man I had spent weeks cataloging and categorizing and refusing to trust, and felt something shift in the architecture of my chest, not collapse. Something more like a door cracking open. Buy me a coffee, I said, and start talking. He chose a diner on Route 9 called Mel's, the kind of place where the booths were cracked vinyl, and the coffee came in mugs with the logo half worn off, and nobody looked twice at anyone. Fluorescent light country music low on a speaker above the register, the smell of burnt toast and old grease that somehow worked at midnight. I slid into the booth across from him and wrapped both hands around the mug the waitress dropped in front of me before I had even fully sat down. Start talking, I said. He looked at me for a moment. Then he put both hands flat on the table and said, My name is Damien Vale. My family owns Vale Dominion. We are an energy and land management company operating across 4 states and 2 territories in Australia. My father built it. My mother runs the board. I am the primary heir. I stared at him. The fluorescent light hummed. Outside on Route 9, a truck went past and rattled the window. Say that again, I said. Which part? All of it. He said it again. Same words, same even tone, watching my face the whole time. I set my mug down. My hands were steady, but my chest was doing something complicated and fast that I did not have a name for yet. I looked at this man in his worn flannel shirt and his truck with the scratch across the rear panel, and the 20% tips and the memory for details I had never asked him to notice, and something in me went very cold. "How long?" I said. "How long what? How long have you known who I am? What my family situation is? What Clayton Briggs is to my father?" My voice was coming out low and tight, and the edge in it was real. "How long have you been sitting at table 12 watching me like I was something you were studying? Elena, answer the question." He did not look away. 8 weeks? I came into Harlow's the first time because it was the closest place open after a late meeting. I came back the second time because of you. By the fourth week, I knew enough about your situation to understand it was serious. By the sixth week, I had confirmed what I suspected about Clayton Briggs. My chair scraped back 2 inches before I even decided to move. "You had me investigated." "No." His voice was firm. "I asked questions. To people who volunteered answers. Nora talked because she cares about you. Brett Briggs was not hard to identify, once I knew what to look for. He's been flagged before for this kind of thing at other establishments. You had no right. You are correct." He said it straight, no deflection. "I had no right, and I am not asking you to forgive that. I am asking you to hear the rest before you decide what to do with it." My jaw ached from how hard I was holding it. My eyes were burning hot and furious, and I was gripping the edge of the table with both hands to keep from standing up and walking out. Because the rage in my chest was real, and underneath it, pressing up through it like something trying to surface, was the specific sickening fear that this was exactly the pattern. Another person deciding my story was theirs to handle. Another person with more power than me deciding they knew what I needed. "You want to tell me," I said, my voice cracking on the last word, "that you are different from every other person who has ever decided they knew better than me what my life should look like?" "No." His voice was quiet. Completely quiet. "I want to tell you that I grew up watching people orbit my family's money like it was a sun. Every relationship, every friendship, every person who sat across a table from me, I was always waiting to find the thing they actually wanted. Because there was always a thing." He paused. "And then I walked into a diner at midnight and watched a woman work a double shift with a textbook in her apron pocket. And I thought that person does not know yet how much they are worth. And I did not want to stop being around when they figured it out." The burning in my eyes got worse. I blinked hard. My throat was so tight it hurt. "That is either the most honest thing anyone has ever said to me," I said, "or the best line I have ever heard." "Could be both," he said. I looked at him across the cracked vinyl booth and the worn coffee mugs and the fluorescent light, and I felt something in the architecture of my chest do something it had not done in years. Not collapse, not open wide, just shift. 1 degree. Enough to let something through. "Tell me the plan," I said. He leaned forward. "Your family will take what they think they can take. Let them. But not blindly on your terms, with documentation, with everything they do recorded and witnessed. Your father's debt to Clayton is not just gambling money. I have reason to believe there is more in those documents than a simple loan. And your sister." He paused. "What about my sister?" "Your older sister is exactly the kind of person who will see an opportunity and take it without thinking about the cost. We give her the opportunity. We control the cost." My heart was hammering, not with fear this time, with something that felt dangerously like hope. "And if it goes wrong," I said, "then I have a lawyer and you have documentation, and we are both in a stronger position than you are right now standing alone." He looked at me directly. "But it will not go wrong, because you are going to be the one running it." I sat with that for a long moment. The coffee had gone cold in my mug. The country music above the register had shifted to something slow. "I need to think," I said. "Take all the time you need." I mean tonight. I need tonight. He nodded. He signaled the waitress for the check without being asked. I drove home alone with the windows down and the Arizona night coming in cold and fast, and I thought about every door that had been shut in my face, and every floor I had slept on, and every paycheck that had been taken, and every year I had spent telling myself it did not matter. It mattered. Every single piece of it mattered, and for the first time in my life, I was going to make it count for something. I called him at 7 the next morning. "I'm in," I said. October in Mesa Ridge smelled like dry grass and cooling asphalt. I drove back to Callaway Street for the first time in 8 months on a Saturday morning, and I made sure to arrive at 11 when my mother would be home from her Saturday morning clients, and my father would be on the couch, and my older sister Vanessa would be awake and looking for something to make herself feel superior about. I wore my better jacket. I drove my newer car. Small details, but in that house, details were a language. My mother opened the door and looked me over in exactly the way I had expected, bottom to top calculating a cash register running behind her eyes. "You look different," she said. "I've been doing well," I said pleasantly. "Can I come in?" The living room smelled the same. Old coffee and Vanessa's hairspray, and something underneath it all that I had never been able to name the specific scent of a house where someone has been unhappy for a very long time. My father was in his chair. He nodded at me without getting up. "Elena." He said my name like it was an item on a list he was getting through. "Hi, Dad." Vanessa came downstairs 10 minutes later in a silk robe phone in hand and stopped on the bottom step when she saw me. Her eyes moved over me the same way my mother's had assessment calculation, and underneath both of those something older and more reflexive. Resentment. "What are you doing here?" she said. "Visiting," I said. "Is that still allowed?" She came down the last step and dropped into the armchair across from me, pulling her robe tighter. "You never just visit. Things change." I let a small smile sit on my face, not warm, just present. "I've been seeing someone. It got serious fast. I think I'm going to be leaving Mesa Ridge for a while." The room changed. I felt it before anyone spoke, a shift in the air, the specific attention of people who have just heard a number they want to know more about. My mother turned from the kitchen doorway. "Leaving for where? Australia, maybe. He has property there, and here." I kept my voice light, easy, like I was talking about weekend plans. "It's a lot. I'm still getting used to it." Vanessa's eyes sharpened. "What does he do?" "Energy, land. His family has been in it for a long time." I looked at my nails. "He's private about the details. I don't push." My father had sat up straighter in his chair. I did not look at him directly. "How serious is serious?" my mother asked. Her voice was careful, controlled. The voice she used when she was very interested and did not want to show how much. "Serious enough that he's already talked to his lawyer about some things." I stood up and stretched. "I'm going to use the bathroom. I haven't eaten. Do you mind if I grab something from the kitchen?" I went upstairs first. The camera I had placed 3 days earlier was exactly where I had left it, a device the size of a coat button pressed into the corner bracket of the bookshelf above my old desk, angled to cover the entire room. I still had the spare key from the years I had lived there. Nobody had ever asked for it back. I had come on a Wednesday morning when my father was at the garage, and my mother had back-to-back clients until noon, a schedule I knew by heart after 22 years of living inside it. Damien's contact had sourced it. It ran on a battery that lasted 72 hours and uploaded wirelessly to an encrypted folder. I set the blue travel folder on the desk. Inside a copy of the tourist visa application confirmation for Australia, a printed flight itinerary from Phoenix to Sydney, dated November 14th, and a printed email exchange that referenced a property near Broken Hill and a guest room being prepared. None of it was fake. All of it was real. All of it was chosen deliberately, placed deliberately in a room with a door I left open by exactly 4 inches when I went back downstairs. I ate a sandwich in the kitchen while my mother asked careful, neutral questions that were not neutral at all. I answered just enough to keep the hunger alive. I did not mention Damien's last name. I did not mention Vale Dominion. I gave them the outline and let their imagination build the rest, because imagination is always greedier than fact. When I left 2 hours later, the folder was still on the desk. The door was still open 4 inches. My mother walked me to my car. "It's nice to see you doing well," she said. Her voice was warm in the practiced way it got when she wanted something. "You should come by more often." "I will," I said. I drove 3 blocks, pulled over, and opened the live feed on my phone. My mother was already on the stairs. She walked into my old room at a pace that was not the pace of someone checking if their daughter had forgotten anything. She went straight to the desk. She picked up the folder. She opened it and stood there reading, and even through the grainy camera feed I could see the change move across her body, the shoulders pulling back the chin, lifting the particular posture of a woman who has just decided that something belonging to someone else is actually hers. She took out her phone and called someone. I could not hear the words, but I did not need to. I knew who she was calling. 20 minutes later, Vanessa appeared in the doorway of my old room. My mother handed her the folder. Vanessa opened it, and even through the small screen, I watched her face go through surprise and then hunger, and then something that looked very much like triumph. She held the flight itinerary up and said something to my mother. My mother nodded. Vanessa smiled wide, satisfied, the smile of someone who had just been handed something they believed they deserved. I sat in my parked car 3 blocks from Calloway Street and watched my mother and my older sister decide to steal my life, and I felt something in my chest that was not grief and was not rage. It was colder than both of those. It was clarity. The trap was set. The bait was taken. And the only thing left to feel was the specific hollow ache of watching your own mother reach for your things without a single second of hesitation, not because she had lost her mind, but because she had made a choice. A clear, deliberate, fully conscious choice. And the choice had never been me. 3 days after I left that folder on the desk, Beatrice called me at 6 in the morning. I was already awake. I had not slept past 4 since the night I watched my mother walk into my old room on a live camera feed and make her choice in under 30 seconds. "Elena." Beatrice's voice was low and careful, the voice she used when she had something to say that she had been turning over in her mind first. "Your sister left this morning. I watched her load 2 suitcases into a cab at 5:15. She had your blue travel folder, the one with the gold clasp. I recognized it from when you showed it to me last week." My hand tightened around the phone until my knuckles ached. "Which direction did the cab go?" "Sky Harbor. I called a friend at the taxi company. The booking was for the international terminal." I closed my eyes. My chest felt like something had reached in and squeezed everything at once. Not surprise, because I had known this was coming, had planned for exactly this. But knowing something is coming and feeling it arrive are two completely different things. The air went out of my lungs in a slow, controlled exhale. "Thank you, Beatrice," I said. "Don't say anything to anyone yet." "Elena." Her voice softened. "Are you all right?" "I will be," I said. "I promise I will be. I called Damien before I had even put shoes on." "She's in the air," I said the moment he picked up. "I know." His voice was awake, alert, already moving. "Grace is at the farm. Everything is in place." "Your mother. She knows what to expect." "My mother," Damien said, and there was something in his voice that was almost dry humor, "has been waiting for this for 2 weeks. She is more prepared than either of us." I almost laughed. The sound that came out was something between a laugh and a breath, and I pressed my free hand flat against my sternum to hold myself together. That same afternoon, I drove past Calloway Street without stopping. The house looked ordinary. Same patchy lawn, same cracked driveway, same curtains in the front window. From the outside, nothing had changed. But I knew my older sister was somewhere over the Pacific with my name on her boarding pass, and I knew my parents were inside that house believing they had just secured Vanessa's future at the cost of mine, and the ordinary-looking house, with the ordinary curtains, felt like a stage set, pretty from the front, nothing but wood and wire behind it. I parked 2 streets over and I called Nora. "It happened," I said. "Oh my God." I heard her set something down hard. She actually took it. She took everything: the folder, the itinerary, the visa confirmation. "Elena." Nora's voice cracked slightly. "How are you doing?" "I am holding it together," I said. "I need to keep holding it together." "You are allowed to be furious. You are allowed to feel this." "I know." My throat tightened. "I'll feel it later. Right now I need to focus." That evening, I made the mistake of driving past the house again. I don't know why. Some part of me that had not yet accepted what my family was kept pulling me back to look, as if one more look might reveal something different. A light was on in the kitchen. Through the window, I could see my mother standing at the counter, phone to her ear, animated in a way she rarely was. I pulled over. I rolled the window down. Her voice was just barely audible through the quiet night air. "Vale Dominion," she said. "I looked it up, Patricia. That's a 9-figure operation. You understand what I'm saying? 9 figures." A pause. Of course I wanted Vanessa in that house. Why would I put Elena there when I can put Vanessa there? Elena would waste it. The words hit me like a physical blow, sharp and flat, and aimed exactly where they would do the most damage. I sat in the parked car with my window down, and the night air coming in cold, and my mother's voice carrying across the quiet street, and my eyes burned so hot that 2 tears broke free before I could stop them. I wiped them away fast and hard with the back of my hand. She had not acted on impulse. She had not panicked. She had researched the Vale family, calculated the value of what she was stealing, and decided deliberately with full information that my older sister deserved it, and I did not. Elena would waste it. I sat with those 3 words for a long time. Then I took out my phone and opened the encrypted recording app. The exterior microphone was sensitive enough in the still night air. My mother kept talking. I kept recording. When she finally went back inside and the kitchen light shifted, I put the car in drive and pulled away from Callaway Street, and I did not cry again. The 2 tears I had already spent were the last ones I was willing to give to this. The trap was running. The recording was time-stamped. And somewhere over the Pacific, my older sister was flying towards something she had never earned, wearing my name like a costume she had borrowed without asking. She had no idea the costume came with a price tag. I know what happened at the farm near Broken Hill because Grace Vale told me later in careful detail with her phone screen, tilted so I could see the footage myself. But I will tell you Vanessa's story the way I lived it in pieces, arriving late, each one worse than the last. Grace Vale was Damien's younger sister, 25 years old, a veterinary resident who had taken 2 weeks of personal leave to play the role of a farmhand at the property near Broken Hill. She was sharp, quiet, and had a memory for detail that made her footage remarkably thorough. She told me later she had filled 3 hours of recording in the first 48 hours alone. Vanessa arrived expecting a car. She got Damien in the scratched-up Ram 1500, same truck, same flannel shirt, same complete indifference to her reaction. "Where's the house?" were the first words out of her mouth, according to Grace. "You're looking at it," Damien said. The property near Broken Hill was not a ruin. It was a working farm, clean and functional, with a main house that was comfortable, and a landscape that was spectacular if you appreciated red dust and open sky, and the specific silence of the Australian outback. Vanessa appreciated none of these things. "This is a farm," she said. "You said you had property in Australia." "This is the property," Damien said, and carried her bags inside. Grace described what came next with the precise clinical tone of someone who had witnessed something unpleasant and processed it by cataloging it accurately. Vanessa walked through the main house, touching surfaces and recoiling from them. She opened the refrigerator, closed it, and announced that she did not eat food that had not been prepared by someone with professional training. That was when Rosalie Vale walked in from the back hallway. Rosalie Vale was 58 years old and the sitting chairwoman of the Vale family board. At the farm, she wore a linen work shirt, her silver hair pulled back, simply a plain apron over her clothes. She looked like exactly what she was pretending to be, a woman who had worked in this house for a long time and knew where everything was kept. Vanessa looked at her the way she had looked at every surface in the house. Assessment, dismissal. "Are you the housekeeper?" Vanessa said. "I help manage the house," Rosalie said pleasantly. "Good." Vanessa set her handbag on the kitchen counter. "I need my room aired out. I need fresh towels, and whatever is in that refrigerator needs to be replaced. I don't eat leftovers." Rosalie looked at her for a moment with an expression Grace described as a surgeon examining a patient, completely professional, entirely devoid of the reaction Vanessa was hoping to provoke. Then she nodded once and went back down the hall. Vanessa lasted 4 days before she turned on Carmen Reyes with a false accusation. Carmen was the farm's head cook, 46 years old, a woman who had been feeding the Vale family and their workers for 11 years. On the 4th day, Vanessa announced at dinner that her silver bracelet was missing and looked directly at Carmen when she said it. "I want to know who has been in my room," Vanessa said. "Only the people who were asked to clean it," Carmen said evenly. "Then one of them took it." Vanessa's voice was sharp and certain, the voice of someone who had accused people without consequence her whole life. "I want it found." Grace found the bracelet 40 minutes later. It was in the zippered inner pocket of Vanessa's own travel bag, the one Vanessa had packed herself. When Grace brought it to her, Vanessa took it without apology, put it on her wrist, and said, "It must have fallen in." Carmen said nothing, but Grace's phone was running. Meanwhile, 3,000 miles away in Mesa Ridge, I was standing in my father's study holding a document that made my hands shake so badly I had to sit down on the floor. I had come to collect a sweater I had left behind months ago. My father was out. My mother was at the salon. I was alone in the house for 40 minutes, and I used them the way I had learned to use every unsupervised moment in that house, by paying attention. The document was in a manila folder on my father's desk, partially covered by a stack of car magazines. A loan agreement, dated 14 months ago. The lender, Clayton Briggs. The amount $620,000. The collateral, a property listed under a name I did not recognize at first, and then did a lot number on a street in the older part of town that matched the address Beatrice had once mentioned in connection with my grandmother. And at the bottom of the signature page, on the line marked guarantor, was my name, Elena Marie Brooks, in handwriting that was not mine. My father had forged my signature and used my grandmother's property, the property that should have come to me as collateral for his gambling debt. I sat on the floor of my father's study with the document in my lap, and my whole body shaking, and I could not tell if what I felt was rage or terror or grief, because it was all three simultaneously pressed together so tight they had become one single unbearable thing. I photographed every page, 12 photos, steady hands despite everything. I texted them to Thomas Reed, the number Damien had given me 3 weeks ago for exactly this kind of moment, and his response came back in 8 minutes. "Don't touch the original. Don't let them know you've seen it. This changes the legal picture significantly." I put the folder back exactly where I had found it, partially under the car magazines, exactly as before. I walked out of that house and I sat in my car, and I pressed both palms hard against the steering wheel, and I breathed until the shaking stopped. My father had not just gambled away his own future. He had gambled away mine. He had written my name onto a debt I had never agreed to carry, and he had used the one thing my grandmother had tried to leave me as the price of it. And somewhere in that house, tucked behind car magazines, the proof of it had been sitting there for 14 months. I should have left after I found that contract. I had the photographs. I had Thomas Reed's number. I had a car parked 2 blocks away and a bag already half-packed at my apartment. Every rational part of me knew the smart move was to walk out that door and not come back until I was standing behind a lawyer. But I also knew that if I disappeared that night, my father would move that document before morning. He would call Clayton, explain that Elena had found it, and by the time Thomas Reed filed anything, the original would be ash in a backyard fire pit. I needed them comfortable. I needed them to believe I still had no idea what was in that folder behind the car magazines. So I stayed. And 3 days later, I understood exactly what staying had cost me. My father called me into the kitchen on a Tuesday evening. My mother was already seated at the table, not eating, just sitting, hands folded, the specific posture she adopted when she had rehearsed what came next. My father closed the kitchen door behind me, and the click of the latch sent a cold spike straight up my spine. "Sit down, Elena," he said. I sat. My hands were steady in my lap. My heart was not. "Clayton Briggs is coming by on Thursday," my father said. He did not look at me when he spoke. He looked at the table, the window, the refrigerator, anywhere that was not my face. "He wants to meet you properly, and we expect you to be here." I looked at him. "Meet me for what purpose exactly?" My mother unfolded her hands and placed them flat on the table. "You are going to marry him, Elena. The ceremony will be small. It will happen within 48 hours of Thursday." The words landed in the room like something dropped from a great height. I heard them clearly, and my brain processed them correctly, and still some part of me needed a full 3 seconds before it could accept that those words had come out of my mother's mouth in the voice she used for grocery lists. "You are telling me," I said, each word measured and deliberate, "to marry a man I have never chosen, in 48 hours. Clayton is willing to forgive the entire debt," my father said, and his voice had the quality of a man reading from a document he had memorized. $620,000. Gone. The house stays. Everything goes back to normal. And I become what payment? My voice cracked on the last word, and I despised myself for it. I pressed my back teeth together. "You are selling me to pay a gambling debt." "Don't be dramatic." My mother's voice was crisp, businesslike, the voice of a woman who had decided that framing this correctly was more important than feeling anything about it. "Clayton is not a bad man. He has a house, a business he has established. Plenty of women would be grateful. I am not plenty of women." I stood up so fast the chair scraped back hard against the tile. "And I am not a transaction." My father finally looked at me. His eyes were red at the rims, not from crying, from the specific exhaustion of a man who had dug himself so deep that other people's lives had become acceptable collateral. "I don't have another option, Elena." "You had 20 years of other options," I said. "You chose this one." That night they took my phone. My mother held out her hand at the bedroom door and said simply, "Give it to me." Behind her, my father stood with his arms crossed, and I understood that the conversation was not a negotiation. I handed it over. My expression gave nothing away. What they did not know was that 3 weeks ago, after Thomas Reed had first reviewed the forged contract photographs, he had told me quietly, "Keep a backup method of communication somewhere they won't look." The spare phone was a prepaid device small enough to fit in the hollowed-out insole of my left sneaker. I had been carrying it for 21 days. That night, I sat on the floor of my childhood bedroom with my back against the locked door and typed with both thumbs, "They took my phone. 48 hours. Thursday. Tell Damien." I sent it to Nora. Her response came in 4 minutes. 3 words. "Already on it." The next morning, Patricia Dunn arrived. Patricia was my mother's cousin, a woman I had met perhaps 6 times in my life at funerals, and one Christmas always with the same expression of practiced concern that covered something harder underneath. She came in through the front door like she had been expected, which she had, and she sat down across from me in the living room and folded her hands and looked at me with the expression of someone about to deliver medicine that was good for you, whether you wanted it or not. Your father built everything this family has, she said. Sometimes children need to carry the weight when parents can't. That's not cruelty, Elena. That's family. My father built a gambling debt, I said. That's what he built. Patricia's expression tightened. You watch your tone. I want to know something. I leaned forward. Did Clayton Briggs pay you to come here and say this to me? The tightening in her face became something else entirely, a flicker fast and involuntary, gone in under a second, but not fast enough. That is an offensive suggestion. That's not a no, I said. She stood up, smoothed her skirt, and announced she would be back Thursday morning for the meeting. She left without saying goodbye. I sat in the living room alone, and my hands were shaking, and my chest felt like it was being slowly compressed from all sides. I thought about Beatrice across the street. I thought about the USB Nora was holding at her apartment with copies of the camera footage, the recording of my mother on the phone, the photographs of the forged contract. Then the front door opened and Brett Briggs walked in like he had been given a key, which I realized he probably had. He stopped in the doorway to the living room and looked at me with the same grin he had worn the night he tried to take my job. Looking forward to Thursday, he said. Try to smile, it photographs better. I looked at him and I felt something move through me that was colder and steadier than rage. Get out of this room, I said. He laughed and went down the hall toward the kitchen where my father was. I heard them talking in low voices, comfortable the voices of people who had already divided the outcome between themselves. I sat in that living room, and I breathed. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The way Beatrice had taught me when I was 9 years old, sitting at her kitchen table with a bandage on my face. Thursday was 2 days away. 2 days was enough. Wednesday night came in slow and heavy, the kind of night that sits on your chest and does not move. I was in my old bedroom with the door locked when I heard it 3 knocks on the back door downstairs, quiet and deliberate, the kind of knock that was not trying to be heard by everyone in the house. Just one person, the person it was meant for. I had been lying on the bed, fully dressed since 10 p.m., shoes on, staring at the ceiling, running through every variable I could think of for tomorrow. I was off the bed before the 3rd knock finished. I went down the back stairs in the dark, avoiding the 3rd step from the bottom that creaked, a skill I had learned at 11 years old when sneaking down for water after being told I had used up my dinner privileges. I eased the back door open, and the night air came in cool and dry. A young woman stood on the back step. Mid-20s, dark hair pulled under a baseball cap, wearing a plain jacket with the collar up. She had Damien's eyes, the same directness, the same quality of looking at you and actually registering what they saw. Elena Brooks, she said quietly. Yes, I said. I'm Grace Vale, Damien's younger sister. She held out a small folded note and a USB drive no bigger than my thumbnail. He couldn't call. He said you'd understand why. I took both. My fingers closed around the USB and held tight. Come in, I said. She shook her head. I can't stay long, but there are things you need to see before tomorrow, and Damien wanted you to have them tonight. I unfolded the note. Damien's handwriting clean, unhurried. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. We will be there. All of it is documented. Trust the plan. Trust yourself. My throat tightened so hard it hurt. I folded the note back up and held it against my sternum for exactly 3 seconds before I put it in my pocket. Tell me about the farm, I said. Grace looked at me for a moment. Then she said, How much do you want to know? Everything. And I said, Start from the beginning. Start, she told me. Standing on the back step in the dark, she told me in the careful, precise language of someone who had been trained to observe and document. She told me about the first day Vanessa's face when she saw the truck. The first words out of her mouth, the way she had walked through the house touching things and recoiling from them, like the furniture had personally offended her. "She met your mother that first afternoon," Grace said. I frowned. "My mother wasn't our mother?" Grace's mouth curved slightly. "Rosalie Vale. She was there the whole time, playing the housekeeper." The ground shifted under my feet. "Your mother was the housekeeper Vanessa was ordering around." "For 2 weeks," Grace said. "Every morning, every meal, every complaint about the thread count of the sheets." She paused. "Your sister told her to pack her bags by the end of the month." Something between a laugh and a sob climbed up my throat, and I pressed my hand over my mouth to hold it down. My eyes burned hot and sudden. I breathed through my nose until the feeling passed. "Show me," I said. Grace turned her phone screen toward me. The footage was clear, the farmhouse setting bright Australian daylight, a kitchen that was functional and clean. Rosalie Vale in her plain apron, silver hair back completely composed. And my older sister Vanessa standing 3 feet away, pointing at her with one finger, her voice coming through the speaker sharp and certain. "I don't care how long you've worked here. When I am the lady of this house, you will do exactly what I say, or you will find somewhere else to be. Do you understand me?" Rosalie looked at her. She did not flinch, did not raise her voice, did not give Vanessa a single thing to use. She simply said, "I understand you perfectly." Watching my sister say those words to a woman she did not know was the chairwoman of a 9-figure company. I felt something crack open in my chest that was not grief and was not anger. It was the specific, exhausted relief of watching someone else finally see exactly who Vanessa Brooks had always been. "There's more," Grace said quietly. "I know." I wiped my eyes fast. "I'll watch the rest inside." Grace left. I locked the back door and went upstairs and sat on the floor of my old bedroom with the USB plugged into my laptop, and I watched 3 hours of footage with the volume low enough that it would not carry through the walls. I watched Vanessa publicly accuse Carmen of theft in front of the entire kitchen staff. I watched her video call Marlene at midnight, crying not from remorse, but from discomfort. "Mom, it's so hot. He's not romantic at all. Why isn't he treating me like I'm special?" And I watched my mother's face on the small screen say, "Stay there. Do whatever it takes. That family's worth more than your comfort." I watched my older sister sign 3 separate documents as Elena Brooks. I watched Thomas Reed's legal notation in the corner of the final clip: identity fraud, visa misrepresentation, fraudulent execution of documents, federal jurisdiction. At some point I realized I was crying. Not the controlled 2-tier kind I had trained myself to produce. The other kind, the kind that comes from somewhere below the chest, that does not ask permission, that arrives because the body has simply held too much for too long and has decided that now, in this locked room at midnight, the night before the worst morning of my life, is the moment to release some of it. I cried for 11 minutes. I know because I watched the timestamp on the footage. Then I dried my face. I straightened my back. I plugged the USB out and held it in my closed fist, and I looked at the locked door of the room that had held me down for the first 18 years of my life, and I felt something settle into place in my chest that had been out of alignment for as long as I could remember. Tomorrow they thought they were ending my story. They had no idea they had been writing my evidence for months. Before I tell you exactly what happened inside that room, before the moment everything collapsed in front of everyone, drop "ready" in the comments. Because what comes next is the part I have been building toward since the very beginning. Just a note, parts of what follows contain fictional elements shaped for narrative purposes. If this is not content you want to continue with, you are welcome to stop here, no hard feelings. December 18th started the color of old pewter, the sky low and flat, the kind of Arizona winter gray that felt like the world was pressing down on everything underneath it. I was dressed by 7 in the morning, not in the white dress my mother had left on the bed the night before. In my own clothes, dark jeans, a gray sweater, the boots I wore to work. My mother knocked at 8 and opened the door before I answered and looked at what I was wearing with an expression that moved through displeasure and into something colder. "Change," she said. "No," I said. She stared at me. In 27 years, I had said that word to her perhaps 4 times. Each time it had cost me something. This time she looked at my face, and something in my expression must have told her that the cost structure had changed, because she stepped back and closed the door without another word. The house filled up by noon. Patricia Dunn arrived first in a blazer carrying a small gift bag that I supposed was meant to make the occasion feel celebratory. 2 of my mother's friends from the salon came next, women who had known me since I was small, and who now looked at me with the careful eyes of people who had been told a version of events, and were hoping I would not complicate it. Clayton Briggs arrived at 1 o'clock. He was 51, broad-shouldered with the particular confidence of a man who had spent decades buying things that were not entirely willing to be bought. He walked into the living room and extended his hand to me like we were closing a business deal, which I supposed we were. "Elena," he said, "I've heard a lot about you." "I'm sure you have," I said. I did not take his hand. His eyes flickered surprise, then recalibration. He smiled the smile of a man who had decided my resistance was a temporary condition. "We're going to get along just fine," he said. Brett came in behind his father, and when his eyes found mine across the room, they carried the same grin he had worn in the Harlow's parking lot in my father's living room 3 days ago, every time he had looked at me since the night he tried to take my job. He had the grin of someone who had never once faced a consequence and had stopped believing consequences applied to him. By 1:30, a marriage officiant my parents had hired was setting documents on the dining room table, a settlement agreement, a signature page, the paperwork that would make the arrangement legal before any ceremony took place. I stood at the edge of the room and watched the pen get placed beside a stack of papers, and I felt my heart rate climb to a frequency I could feel in my temples. Not from fear, from timing. I knew what 2 p.m. meant. I knew what was coming. But knowing something is coming and standing in a room full of people who believe they have already won is a specific kind of pressure that sits on every nerve simultaneously. My mother put her hand on my elbow. "Come sign," she said. Her voice was pleasant, social, the voice she used with her best clients. "Let's get this done." I looked at her hand on my elbow. I looked at her face. And I said, "Take your hand off me." She flinched. Around the room, 3 conversations went quiet. "Elena," my father started. The front door opened. He had timed it precisely. Vanessa's flight from Sydney had landed at 11:45, and Thomas had calculated she would walk through that front door no earlier than 2:30. That left him a window. He intended to use every minute of it. He carried a leather document case under one arm, and he moved through the room with the focused economy of a man who billed by the hour and did not waste a minute of it. Behind him, Sheriff Owen Carter stepped through the door in full uniform badge, catching the flat winter light. He was followed by 2 deputies. Behind all of them, Damien. The room stopped. I watched it happen. The conversations that had gone quiet went quieter. The bodies that had been relaxed went rigid, and Clayton Briggs turned from the table with the expression of a man who had just realized the room he was standing in was not the room he had thought it was. "What is this?" my father said. His voice cracked on the last word. Thomas Reed set his document case on the nearest clear surface and opened it. "Mr. Brooks, my name is Thomas Reed. I represent the Vale family, and I am also acting as legal counsel for your daughter Elena in matters related to a fraudulent loan guarantee contract bearing her forged signature, the suppression of a legal inheritance, and a pattern of financial coercion." I have filed the relevant documentation with the Maricopa County Superior Court and with the Arizona Attorney General's office. Sheriff Carter has a warrant. Sheriff Carter held up the warrant document, a single clean motion, no theatrics, the gesture of a man who had done this enough times to know it did not need embellishment. "Nobody leaves until we are finished," he said. Clayton took one step toward the door. Both deputies moved at the same time. Mr. Briggs," Thomas said without looking up from his documents, "you are currently under investigation for unlicensed lending activity, coercive debt collection practices, and conspiracy to commit marriage fraud. I would suggest you stay." Clayton stopped. His face had gone the color of old concrete. Damien walked to the television in the corner of the room, connected a small device to the HDMI port, and turned to face the room. His eyes found mine across the space, and held for exactly 1 second, not a question, not reassurance, just acknowledgement. I gave him the smallest nod I had. The screen came to life. The first clip, my older sister Vanessa at the farm near Broken Hill, standing in the kitchen with the brightness of the Australian morning behind her, pointing at Rosalie Vale in her plain apron and saying with complete practiced contempt, "When I am the lady of this house, you will do exactly what I say, or you will find somewhere else to be." My mother made a sound. Soft, involuntary, the sound of someone watching a structure they built begin to crack at the foundation. The second clip, Vanessa on a video call with Marlene late at night, the farm dark behind her. Her voice was petulant and sharp. "Mom, I have her visa, her name, everything. When this is done, Elena can go marry whoever Dad wants. I'll be the one with the money." Marlene's voice from the phone screen, tinny, small, but perfectly clear. "Good. Stay the course." The third clip, Vanessa at a desk signing her name, Elena Brooks, on 3 separate documents with a date stamp in the corner of the frame. Thomas Reed's voice narrating over the footage. 3 counts of identity fraud, 1 count of visa misrepresentation, 1 count of fraudulent execution of financial documents, all federal jurisdiction. Damien turned off the screen. He looked at Clayton, then at my father, then at my mother. When he spoke, his voice was not loud. It was the quiet of something very heavy placed very carefully. "You took a folder," he said. "You took a name. You took documents that did not belong to you, and you built a plan on top of them. But you never had the person those things belonged to." He paused. "And you never will." I set the pen down on the table beside the unsigned documents. I looked at my mother. She opened her mouth. Whatever she intended to say, it did not come. Thomas Reed did not give my mother time to find her voice. He moved to the center of the room with the unhurried precision of a man who had done the preparation and was now simply delivering it, and he set 3 folders on the table beside the unsigned marriage contract before anyone in the room had finished processing what was on the screen. "I want everyone in this room to understand exactly what they are facing," he said. "I am going to be precise." He opened the first folder and turned it toward the room. "Victor Brooks. A forensic handwriting analysis conducted by a certified examiner confirms that the signature on the loan guarantee contract listing Elena Marie Brooks as guarantor for $620,000 is not Elena's handwriting. Variance points are documented on pages 4 through 7. This constitutes criminal forgery under Arizona Revised Statute 13202, a Class 4 felony." My father's face collapsed. Not in remorse, in the specific implosion of a man who has been running from something for years and has finally been caught, with nowhere left to go. He dropped into the nearest chair and pressed both hands over his face, and the sound that came out of him was low and ugly and had nothing to do with crying. "Victor!" My mother's voice cracked sharp across the room. "Don't say a word, not one word, Mrs. Brooks." Thomas looked at her without raising his voice. "The window for damage control closed some time ago. What you can do now is cooperate and reduce your own exposure." "I have no exposure." Her voice climbed strained. I haven't done anything. You are on a recording, Thomas said, made on a public street in November. You told a woman named Patricia Dunn that you had researched the Vale family's assets and made a deliberate decision to place your older daughter in Elena's position to access those assets. The recording is authenticated and time-stamped. That is conspiracy to commit fraud. Marlene's face went white. Not gradually. All at once, like a switch being thrown. Sheriff Carter stepped forward. Clayton Briggs. Clayton had not moved from where the deputies had stopped him. He stood with his arms at his sides, jaw tight, the expression of a man whose odds had just shifted past the point of recovery. You are under investigation for unlicensed lending operations, coercive debt collection, and conspiracy to arrange a marriage under duress. My office has been in contact with the Arizona Department of Financial Institutions. Carter paused. We have a list of other borrowers. I want my lawyer, Clayton said. You're right, Carter said. He can meet you at my office. Brett took one step toward the back hallway. A deputy's hand came up immediately. Sir, stay in the room. The grin Brett had carried into this house was gone. What replaced it was something younger and much less composed, the face of a man who had spent his whole life borrowing his father's confidence and was only now discovering that confidence had a limit. The incident at Harlow's Steakhouse. Thomas said, holding up a printed still from the camera footage, Brett's face clear and unambiguous, the Briggs auto lanyard visible at his collar. Tampering with a restaurant tab, filing a false complaint against an employee. Misdemeanor fraud on its own. But it establishes pattern. Pattern matters in a conspiracy case. Hank Miller stood near the dining room doorway, quiet, carrying a signed statement from Harlow's. He had come on Thomas's request. He looked at Brett with the flat expression of a man who had almost been made complicit in something and was never going to let himself forget it. Then Beatrice Sloan walked in from the front door. 68 years old, dressed neatly, carrying a manila envelope she had kept in a fireproof lockbox under her bed since the year my grandmother died. She looked at my mother first, one long, steady look that carried 18 years of witnessing inside it. Then she looked at me, and her face changed completely, something warm and worn and deeply relieved, moving across it all at once. Thomas took the envelope. The original will of Margaret Ann Brooks, Elena's maternal grandmother. Dated October 2019. Witnessed and notarized by Beatrice Sloan. He opened it. Margaret Brooks bequeathed a residential property and a savings account valued at approximately $94,000 to Elena Marie Brooks. This will was suppressed. The property was subsequently used as collateral in the fraudulent loan guarantee without Elena's knowledge. He looked directly at Marlene. Suppression of a legal will constitutes probate fraud under Arizona law. Up to 3.5 years. My mother made a sound I had never heard from her before, short, broken, something giving way underneath it. She pressed both hands over her mouth. Her shoulders shook once violently. Then she pulled herself back together with the same iron will she had used to run that house for 30 years. But her eyes were wet, and for the first time in my life, my mother looked genuinely afraid. I watched her face and waited for something to move in my chest. Sympathy. Grief. Even the faint residue of love. Nothing moved. Just a cool, clean clarity, a debt being finally correctly assigned to the people who had actually chosen to carry it. Elena. Thomas closed the folder. Your grandmother's estate will be fully restored. The property, the account, all accrued interest. My office will handle the transfer. Beatrice looked at me from across the room. Eyes bright, chin steady. She gave me one small nod, the same nod she had given me across her kitchen table when I was 9 years old and had decided not to cry in front of people who did not deserve my tears. I nodded back. My throat was too full for words. It did not matter. She understood everything inside that nod. She always had. My mother looked at me then, directly. The first time in my life she had truly looked at me, not assessed me, not calculated me, not looked through me. Her face was wet and frightened, and somewhere at the very bottom of it, something that might have been the first edge of understanding. Too late. We both knew it. "I have nothing to say to you," I said. The voice came out steady and quiet, the voice I had built over 27 years. "Not today." I turned away from her and looked at Damien. He stood near the doorway watching me with the expression of someone who has been holding a breath for a very long time and is finally carefully letting it go. "Let's go," I said. Thomas had arranged it deliberately, the timing, the flight, all of it. Vanessa's plane from Sydney had landed at Sky Harbor at 11:45 that morning. Thomas had sent a legal notice to the farm near Broken Hill 4 days earlier, informing her that her presence was required in Mesa Ridge on December 18th, in connection with an ongoing federal investigation into identity fraud and visa misrepresentation. The notice had been carefully worded to sound like a routine legal summons, cooperative, not urgent, the kind of language that does not set off alarm bells in people who believe they have not yet been caught. She walked through the front door of the Brooks house at 2:47 p.m., 47 minutes after Thomas Reed had finished laying out the evidence against everyone else in the room. She had a rolling carry-on behind her, and the particular energy of someone who had spent a long flight rehearsing explanations. Her hair was done. Her clothes were right. She had put on the full version of herself for this homecoming, and for exactly 3 seconds after she walked in, before her eyes finished moving around the room, she looked like someone who believed she was walking back into a situation she could still manage. Then she saw Sheriff Carter. Then she saw Thomas Reed's open document case on the table. Then she saw me. Her face did something complicated and fast, surprise, folding into calculation, folding into the first real flicker of fear I had ever seen on my older sister's face. It looked strange there, like a crack in a surface that had always presented as solid. "What?" She looked at our mother. "Mom, what is happening?" Marlene pressed both hands flat on her thighs and said nothing. She could not look at Vanessa directly. "Vanessa Brooks." Thomas Reed stepped forward. His voice was even and precise, the voice of a man who had done this part of his job many times and felt no pleasure in it, and no hesitation either. "You entered Australia on December 2nd using a visa application submitted under the name Elena Marie Brooks. You signed multiple official documents during your stay, including financial disclosure forms and a guest declaration, all under that same name. You were aware at the time of signing that Elena Marie Brooks had not consented to this use of her identity." Vanessa's carry-on handle dropped from her fingers. The bag tipped sideways against her leg and she did not reach for it. Her eyes were moving fast around the room, looking for the exit that did not exist. "That's not— I was invited," she said. Her voice came out thinner than I had ever heard it. "Damien invited me. He knew who I was. He knew exactly who you were," Damien said from the far side of the room. His voice was quiet and level and carried across the space without effort. That was the point. Vanessa looked at him. Something shifted in her expression, the calculation giving way to something rawer and more genuine. Betrayal. Real, stinging betrayal, the kind that only lands when you thought you had the upper hand. "You set me up," she said. "You set yourself up," he said. "I simply made sure there was a record of it." Then Rosalie Vale walked in from the hallway. She was not wearing the plain apron. She was not wearing the work shirt or the simple linen that she had worn every day at the farm for 2 weeks. She was dressed as herself. Neat, composed, the specific bearing of a woman who had chaired board meetings and made decisions that moved 9 figures, and had never once needed anyone's permission to be in a room. Vanessa went perfectly still. Rosalie looked at my older sister the way a doctor looks at an X-ray, not with malice, not with pleasure, simply with the full and accurate picture of what was there. "I believe," Rosalie said, her voice calm and warm and completely without cruelty, "the last instruction you gave me was to have my bags packed by the end of the month." The sound that came out of Vanessa was not a word. It was something that started as a protest and collapsed before it reached her lips, and what replaced it was a gasp that she pressed both hands over her mouth to contain, and her eyes filled with the specific tears of someone who has just understood fully, completely, all at once, that they have destroyed something they cannot rebuild. "The woman you ordered around every morning," Damien said, "is my mother. She is also the person who determines whether anyone joins the Vale family in any capacity. I think you already know what her determination is." Vanessa's knees buckled. She grabbed the doorframe with one hand and held herself upright by sheer will, her face crumpling mascara beginning to track down both cheeks in thin, dark lines. She turned to Marlene. Her voice broke completely. Mom." The word came out like a child's word stripped of everything adult, raw, and small. "Mom, you told me this would work. You said it was safe. You said, Vanessa." Marlene's voice was sharp with the particular desperation of a woman trying to stop an avalanche with one hand. "Stop talking. You said it was safe." Vanessa's voice climbed, cracking the composure she had walked in with disintegrating in real time. "You researched them. You said there was no way it could come back on us. You said Elena would never." "Vanessa, stop." But the words were already in the room, already documented. Thomas Reed's associate in the corner had been running a recording device since the moment the proceedings began, as was legal under Arizona law with law enforcement present. I watched my older sister cry in the doorway of our parents' house with her carry-on tipped against her leg and her mascara running and her mother refusing to look at her, and I felt something I had not expected. Not satisfaction, not triumph, just a quiet, enormous exhaustion, the exhaustion of someone who has been carrying a weight for so long that when it finally lifts, the absence of it is almost louder than the weight itself. Thomas stepped toward Vanessa with a document. "These are the federal charges being referred to the U.S. Attorney's Office. You have the right to retain counsel. I would strongly advise you to do so before you say anything further." Vanessa took the document with shaking hands. She looked at it without reading it. Then she looked at me, one long, direct look across the room past all the wreckage of the plan she and our mother had built. I looked back. I did not look away. I did not give her anger or pity, or the satisfaction of seeing either one. I gave her the same face I had given our father when I was 9 years old, standing in a hallway with a bruise on my cheek and a decision already made. Then I turned and walked to the front door. The cold hit me the second the front door swung shut behind me. Clean winter air, the smell of dry grass and asphalt, and something underneath both of them I could not name, but had been waiting my whole life to breathe. I stood on the porch of the Brooks house on Callaway Street, and I breathed it all the way down. Not the controlled kind I had been practicing for 20 years to keep my face from showing too much. The real kind. The kind that actually reaches the bottom of your lungs. Behind me, through the closed door, I could hear my mother's voice fractured high, the specific pitch of a woman who has run out of ways to manage what is happening to her. A deputy answered, calm and procedural. My father said something I could not make out and did not try to. I did not turn around. Beatrice was on the bottom porch step, coat on hands folded in her lap, looking out at Callaway Street, like someone who had been waiting for this exact moment for a very long time, and was only now allowing herself to feel it arrive. She heard the door and turned, and her eyes filled immediately not with sadness, with something older and more complete than sadness. The relief of a woman who had watched a child be wronged for 18 years and had finally seen it put right. I sat down beside her. My legs were not entirely steady. "It's done," I said. My voice came out thinner than I expected, like something that had been held under pressure for too long and was only now being released. "Yes." Her voice was thick. "It is." She put her arm around my shoulders and I leaned into her, and neither of us spoke, because neither of us needed to. Across the street, her yellow house sat with its green shutters in the pale December light, and I thought about every morning I had walked past it with wet shoes and an empty stomach, and how she had always been at the window, and how much that had mattered even when I could not say it out loud. Beatrice. My voice cracked on her name. You kept that will for 6 years. I kept it for you, she said. Your grandmother made me promise. She said Elena will need it when the time comes. Don't give it to her before she's ready. Give it to her when she's strong enough to make it count. She pulled back and looked at my face, her own eyes wet and completely unashamed. I think she would be very proud of you today. My throat closed so hard it hurt. 2 tears broke free, and this time I let them go. I had earned every one of them. I'm going to miss this street, I said, and I meant it. Not the house, not the people inside it, but the cracked pavement and the smell of summer grass and that yellow house with the green shutters directly across the road. I'm going to miss you. I'll still be here, Beatrice said, and squeezed my shoulder once firm, steady, the grip of someone who wants you to feel held. And you will call me. Every Sunday. That is not a request. A laugh climbed out of me, wet and genuine and completely out of my control. Every Sunday, I said. I promise. Nora's car pulled up to the curb 20 minutes later. She got out, looked at my face, and said, You look terrible. I feel incredible, I said. She crossed the yard and wrapped both arms around me so hard the air left my lungs, and I held on just as hard. Against my shoulder, she said, I was so scared. I had Damien's number pulled up on my phone for 2 hours straight. I know. I pulled back and looked at her red eyes mascara that had not survived the afternoon, the expression of someone who had been holding their breath for a very long time. Thank you. For every single piece of it. Don't. She shook her head, her voice fierce. You did this. I just held some files. You held the right files, I said. At the right time. That is not nothing. She squeezed both my hands hard. Where are you going now? Forward, I said. I am going forward. Damien was leaning against the scratched Ram 1500 at the end of the driveway. Same truck, same jacket, unchanged through all of it. He straightened when I came down the steps, and his eyes moved over my face the way they always did, registering everything without asking me to explain any of it. How are you? He asked. Ask me again in a month, I said. Right now, I'm somewhere between the most exhausted and the best I've ever felt, and I cannot tell where one ends and the other begins. He almost smiled. That sounds about right. I stopped in front of him and looked up at the flat December sky over Mesa Ridge, gray, low, pressing down. The same sky I had walked under for 27 years. The same sky that had been over every moment something was taken from me, every time I was told to be smaller. Every year I held myself together by sheer will and told myself it did not matter. It had mattered. Every single piece of it. I spent my whole life in that house trying to earn the right to exist in it, I said. And now I finally understand why it was never enough. It was never about enough. It was about keeping me exactly where they needed me. I looked at him. Manageable. And now, he said, now I'm not manageable anymore. I picked up my bag from the driveway, one bag, everything I actually needed inside it. And that is the most terrifying and the most wonderful thing I have ever said out loud. He opened the passenger door. I looked once at the Brooks house, the cracked driveway, the patchy lawn, the curtains in the front window that had not moved. The house that had taken everything it could reach and had still in the end not been able to take enough. Then I turned away from it. Completely. Without looking back. Ready? Damien said. Yes, I said. And I meant it in every direction at once. The airport smelled like burnt coffee and jet fuel, and I had never loved a smell more in my life. Nora grabbed my elbow the second we stepped through the sliding doors, her grip tight enough that I felt her nails through my jacket sleeve. Elena Brooks, she said, voice cracking right down the middle. If you cry before I do, I will never forgive you. My throat closed so fast I had to tip my head back and stare at the fluorescent lights just to keep the tears from spilling. I'm not crying, I managed. My eyes are just leaking. Oh, that's disgusting. She laughed and then pulled me into a hug so fierce my ribs complained. You're disgusting. I love you so much. I held her back just as hard, my chin digging into her shoulder, my chest shaking with a laugh that was halfway to a sob. Thank you, I whispered against her hair. For the texts, for the plan, for every single thing. Don't thank me. Nora pulled back and framed my face with both hands, her own eyes red and wet and absolutely furious at themselves for it. You set the trap. You held your nerve. I just hit send. I laughed again, and this time it came out clean. Damien was standing 3 feet away holding 2 paper cups of coffee he'd pulled from a vending cart. He held one out when I turned. 3-hour layover, he said. You're going to need this? I took the cup and felt the warmth bleed through my palms. You planned it on purpose, didn't you? I planned a buffer. The corner of his mouth lifted. Call it whatever you want. I call it suspicious. But I took a sip. No sugar, half a measure of milk exactly right, and my chest squeezed so hard I had to breathe through it. How long have you known how I take my coffee? Table 12, he said quietly. Week 3. My heart did something involuntary and embarrassing, and I hated it a little. Nora announced she needed the bathroom and marched away at full speed, heels clicking sharp on the tile. The moment she disappeared into the crowd, Damien set his cup down on a nearby bench and turned to face me fully. His jaw worked for a second the way it did when he was deciding how honest to be. Elena. His voice dropped low and direct. I need to say something before we board, and I need you to let me finish before you argue. My grip tightened around the coffee cup. That opening is not reassuring. I know. He exhaled. I've known about your situation since before I walked into Harlow's. I sat at table 12 every week because I was watching, and then, somewhere between week 3 and week 7, I stopped watching and started waiting. Waiting for you to finish your shift. Waiting to see if you'd look up. Waiting for a reason that had nothing to do with Clayton Briggs or your father's debt or any of it. He paused and his eyes stayed steady on mine. No evasion, no retreat. I'm telling you this now because once we land, the legal part is over. The plan is done, and I don't want you thinking that everything I did was only strategy. My eyes stung so fast it startled me. I pressed my lips together and looked down at the cup, because looking at him directly was suddenly too much for my sternum to manage. Damien. I'm not asking for an answer, he said quickly. I'm not asking for anything. I needed you to know that it's real, that I'm not a next chapter in someone else's plan for your life. His voice roughened at the edges. You've had enough of those. The boarding announcement crackled overhead. My heart was hammering so loud I was mildly concerned he could hear it. I looked up at him, at the careful steadiness in his face, at the way he was holding himself very still, the way people do when they're trying not to push, and something in my chest unlocked just one notch. Not all the way. Not yet. But one notch was more than I had given anyone in 27 years. Ask me again, I said, in 6 months, after I've slept past 6 in the morning at least 30 times. After I've walked across that land in Broken Hill and stopped feeling like a guest on it. I felt a slow smile pull at my mouth, the kind that came from somewhere genuine and quiet and entirely mine. Ask me when I've had enough time to see who you are when there's nothing left to fix. Something shifted in his expression, not relief exactly, but something warmer and more careful than relief. 6 months, he said. At least. I raised my coffee cup toward him like a small, ridiculous toast. Don't be late. Nora came back, eyes slightly damp but chin at a triumphant angle, and linked her arm through mine as the gate opened ahead of us. I didn't look back at the exit. I didn't look back at Mesa Ridge or the house, or the girl who used to scrub floors at 5 in the morning while her sister slept past noon. I looked straight ahead at the gate, the window, the pale sky beyond the glass, and I smiled. For the first time, the direction I was walking was entirely my own. And somewhere beside me, 3 feet to the right, Damien Vale was walking in the same direction. Not because anyone planned it, because I let him. Looking back at everything that happened, I can only say this. I spent years living under the same roof as people I called family, while they spent those same years taking everything from me piece by piece with a smile on their face. There is a verse my grandmother Margaret kept underlined in her old Bible: "The truth will set you free." I did not understand it until the day I set the trap myself and watched the truth walk straight into it. If you are inside a relationship, family, or otherwise where you constantly doubt yourself, constantly apologize for things you never did, constantly shrink so others can feel bigger, do not wait the way I waited. Do not assume that blood makes betrayal impossible. Family betrayal cuts deeper than any stranger ever could, and those family Reddit stories you scroll past at midnight thinking, that could never be me. Sometimes it is exactly you. My personal take is simple: being kind is never the mistake. Allowing people to weaponize your kindness without consequence, that is where things go wrong. If this story reached something inside you, leave a comment below and tell me what moment hit hardest. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want to follow what comes next, you know what to do. Thank you for staying until the very last word. It means more than I can say. A note before we continue: upcoming stories contain fictional elements crafted purely for storytelling and reflection. If this type of content is not for you, no hard feelings, go find what feeds your soul instead.